So where are you running your private cloud? That was something that you wanted to explore.
Yeah, when you try and sort of get this sense of how much of the workloads out there are running the public cloud or a private cloud or legacy on-premises, you get this sort of story that says, hey, there's an awful lot more private cloud out there than maybe we would have thought. And so a couple of things spring to mind. Firstly is, where's everybody running it and what are the implications of running it in different locations? And the second one, which is sort of slightly more fundamental, is it really cloud? I think there's a level of that potentially going on, because if you look at, the likes of, statements coming out of Amazon and Microsoft, particularly about, how much, is public cloud, it's 20 to 30% is public cloud. And you think, well, where's the rest going? Is it all private cloud? Because when you look at some of the figures for cloud adoption, it seems to go over the top. So let's break that down. First one is actually, where are you running that? And the implications are for the IT operations people, because you can run a private cloud in a number of locations. You can give it to AWS or Microsoft or GCP or one of the other public cloud providers and let them run it for you as a private instance inside their infrastructure, which is fine, and actually that takes away from IT ops and the enterprise generally, the challenge of both managing but also acquiring the infrastructure to deal with it. So if you don't want your own infrastructure, you really don't want it, then you need to think about giving it to those people. Then quite a lot, go to the other extreme. You can run a private cloud in your own enterprise data center. You've got all the issues of provisioning, procurement, provisioning, and management of that environment. And is it genuinely, this is where I sometimes get an issue with, when you see all the stats for the amount of private cloud out there, is it genuinely a cloud in the sense that you and I would understand cloud in terms of, scaling, automation, provisioning, all those sort of issues, charging, for use base. Is it really genuine cloud? And I suspect quite a lot of it isn't what I would call it. It's probably virtualization, to various levels of virtualization, but is it genuine private cloud? I don't know. But that's a decision you can make. And certainly the likes of HP and Dell and others will help you in that process if you want to do that, because they'll put kit on the floor, as it were, in Green Lake or using Dell's environment, which you can sort of pay for as you use. But it's sometimes it's a little bit of a financial juggling act rather than a real, automated, just provision as and when you need it approach. So it's a decision, you can have it, but a virtualized environment. The question is, do you then charge your end user properly for that on an as-use basis, so that the IT department becomes a profit center in its own right? So again, I question, but that's the sort of decision you have to make. The second one, with the one in the middle between the sort of handing it all to the public cloud providers to run as a private instance on their infrastructure, is to use co-location. And I think quite a lot of it has gone to co-location. And if you tie that back to the desire of enterprises to get out of running their own data centers, quite a lot of that existing infrastructure and maybe some of the private clouds are moving into co-location. And why are they moving into co-location? Well, it's simple, I don't have the physical cost of the data center, but you've still got all the costs of running it. Yeah. You've got all the costs of managing, provisioning, all those sort of things, because colo is just a warehouse for it, with the best one in the world. Sure, you go to an Equinix data center and it's an interconnect hub. It's a network hub rather than just a warehouse for servers. But that's the question. Or you can get a managed service provider. And there's an interesting question about what happens to all the old MSPs and ISVs out there. What's happened to them? They've got a role to play with their customers to help them into this world and actually provide some of that, cloud facility. So I think that's as much as anything else was, where's it happening and how much is genuine cloud? Again, we get lazy with the term, don't we? And at Blur, whether you call it lazy or we've just sort of, said we can't be keeping the waters back all the time, is that, we view cloud as a consumption model. And if you view it as a consumption model, you maybe, go away from the old, specific view of what cloud actually is, because people will make old-fashioned hosting into a cloud solution. I think an awful lot of people are doing that. They're using hosting and using the term cloud. So that's why I'm just curious. And at Blur, we've been looking at how do we start to do some qualitative primary research around some of these questions. Because obviously there's the guys like IDC and various others that do huge amounts of quantitative research. And I keep running into the problem of actually what's happening out there, because it's quite difficult to get the granularity of what's happening. And you see individual bits of research that lead you. And so at the moment, I'm sort of pulling research together from so many different sources and trying to define and glean from that what's actually going on in the market. So I think there's a long way to go before real cloud adoption becomes the majority of what's going on out there in terms of IT processing, data processing, and you go to Google and you go to others, they would admit that. They say, we're only at about 20 to 30% of available, they think they've got a long way to go.
Sure. And I mean, I guess this space has maybe somewhat been neglected. It's mentioned in passing when people are kind of talking about cloud, and they say it's kind of private cloud, hybrid cloud, multi-cloud, public cloud, but actually, what is it? Is anybody doing any private cloud? And in private cloud, we're talking about actual private cloud, not a hybrid solution or something, just actually running something in a sort of a cloud environment, whatever that cloud environment is, and we'll come back to that maybe in a minute. But it's actually a private cloud of some kind. And then perhaps you look at so that's kind of setting the scene, but then you maybe say, okay, so where actually is it physically? Is it actually back in your data center and you're just kind of doing a private cloud? Is it, as you said, in kind of an MSP colo type of place? Have you lobbed it over the fence into, for the public cloud providers to kind of run it for you? Maybe there's a small percentage doing that. So location would be kind of one thing maybe to ask about. Sort of where is your private cloud? And then the other one could be, what type of private cloud is it, that you run? What is the platform? Is it still, good old VMware? Is it OpenStack? Do you actually call your, Nutanix HCI, a private cloud, for example? Or do you call VMware's SDDC, software defined data center, kind of your private cloud? Or is it actually one of the new, the hot shots of the cloud service providers, the Azure Stack, the AWS Outposts, or even EKS Anywhere from AWS, or Google Anthos or something like that, right? So there's kind of maybe the location, and then maybe what type of actual platform is it, and then maybe what workloads as a third thing that you're running on it.
I delve a bit deeper, I think, into say, what outcome are you giving your users? When you go to public cloud, the relationship is between the IT department and the public cloud in terms of how
it's fairly clear. It's
fairly clear, albeit they're quite complex pricing models, but that's a different question.
That's a different question.
Different question. When you come to a private cloud, the debate then becomes the IT department is effectively the AWS in this debate, and the end user, i.e. a business department or a business user, was the old IT department in the old debate. So what do they see? Are they seeing they're only getting charged for when their application runs? Is it flexible enough that the end user can be charged per usage on a per second, per minute, per whatever it is basis? Number one. Then if the user then says, I need to scale this, I've got peaks and troughs and God knows what, and can they do it? And there you talk about, what does HP or Lenovo or Dell put on the floor, and how do they construct the relationship that says, if an end user suddenly says, hey, we've got a promotion coming up and my throughput's going to go up by 50-60%, can you provision me more servers tomorrow or next week? And they go, it's going to take 3 months. You go, well, that's no good. That's not a private cloud. It's those sort of challenges. Hey, have you got a chargeback mechanism? Can you provision or could an end user provision it rather than you have to go to the IT department? All those sort of questions. I suspect in many cases it won't be a clear-cut answer.
I can agree with that. I mean, I can certainly speak from experience on some of that. This is not obviously the solution that everybody was necessarily implementing 5 to 10 years ago, but certainly in some of the roles that I've done in the past, OpenStack, for example, was designed to be that. So it did have a chargeback module. It did have for all intents and purposes, an observability module. It had a auto provisioning sort of capability as well. I think what's happened is that some of those aspects, and never mind, as you just pointed out, never mind the management of that, the managing, updating, patching, securing, etc. So the maintenance aspect of it, the management aspect of a platform like OpenStack, which is a job in itself. But the growth, the scalability aspect of it was all supposed to be in there. But how, as you said, how well is that being done? And are we actually maximizing that capability? Can we do that? If you come to me, as I'm IT and you're you're marketing or sales or whatever, and you have this campaign, as you said, can I scale you up by tomorrow or 48 hours? Can I scale up your service for you? Even though I am running OpenStack, and OpenStack should know or should facilitate that capability, make that capability a little bit better, a little bit faster, a little bit easier to do. So certainly, I think in answer to some of your questions, OpenStack, for example, was designed to that. I'm sure, HCI and SDDC and so on were all also kind of geared to for that capability, to actually offer you that sort of capability. And let's not forget that actually went on, even further. We started having things like, Mesos, for example, kind of the server operating system, so-called server, or, platforms like OpenShift or Pivotal, or even just kind of Kubernetes distributions, really.
But the point is, and I think this is the sort of point it comes back down to, which is a bit sort of prosaic in one sense, is that whatever cloud you're using, however many of the tools you're using, however fluffy that cloud is, somewhere down the line, all that data, all those transactions hit a server, hit a switch, hit a storage array. Physically it's still there. So if you hand it over to AWS or Azure or GCP, you're going, well, they've got the scale, and obviously it's their issue about how they deal with that. If I do it in my data center, or even if I use a colo, I've got to think about how I do that. Can I afford to do that? Will my vendors who I work with, help me achieve that in some sort of way with some sort of financial arrangement? But it usually gets quite messy. It's not as clear cut as, I just charge them for a transaction. I don't have to worry about it. And when they suddenly need more, it bursts. I haven't got it on the floor. How quickly can Dell get me another server? Those sort of questions. Dell can put it on the ground and they're going to say, yeah, but am I going to leave a server that you're not paying for 300 days of the year and 65 days of the year you actually need the extra word? You just want to pay for it on a transaction basis. So it becomes a different financial discussion. Is that genuine cloud? It's back to my original question. And therefore, are we kidding ourselves that the world has gone completely cloudy? I mean, there's a different discussion around cloud, which is, about the development tools and how you're developing those applications, and back to something that you said. But I think there's a real sort of danger that we get into this, hey, I've got a private cloud. And it's what you might tell your senior business leaders. Hey, it's all right, don't worry, we're in the cloud. A bit like telling them that you're doing DevOps, and actually the reality is that 80% of your time you're trying to manage the legacy environment. And everybody at the top thinks, hey, we've got a private cloud, hey, we're doing DevOps. And when you get down to the guts of it, they're not doing that.
Yeah,
that's more realistic than getting a little starry-eyed about private cloud.
Yeah, no, I can appreciate that, and I think yes, it's in a fair proportion, I would say, is certainly I think that's certainly evident, and certainly the reality for a fair portion of kind of what we would quote unquote call cloud, sort of stuff. So I do agree with that. I think the private cloud, really private cloud, whatever that happens to be, wherever it is, whatever it's running, and whatever the purpose is, has somewhat been overtaken by hybrid cloud. No sooner did we kind of catch our breath on what cloud is and private cloud means, did the hybrid cloud come along, because the public cloud provider said, well, we can't have this kind of disconnect between your private cloud and our public cloud, so we need something that will connect the two. And then the excitement kind of started around hybrid cloud. So maybe some of it has kind of been somewhat overtaken, I think, and sort of overshadowed by sort of the advent of hybrid cloud.
Yeah, but I back to my original point. If you've got applications, data, networks that are reliant on or not reliant on AWS or GCP or Azure or one of the other public cloud providers, you've still got all the challenges of provisioning, you've still got all the challenges of management, and the likelihood of it being genuinely cloudy, if I can use that term, is probably pretty rare. And so it's just, we're sort of in danger of kidding ourselves that we're moved farther and faster into a cloud world than we actually have. Not that you and I shouldn't be talking about all the latest developments in cloud. We've had this discussion before, and absolutely should, because you're trying to drag everybody along behind us, in the sense of getting them to do it. But the reality is, you've got to find, when you look at the research that says, how many of the people who say they're using multi-cloud or hybrid cloud have got more than the odd application that uses that sort of capability? They might be using multiple clouds because actually a particular application runs better under GCP than it does on AWS or Azure. But have they connected, those three together? I mean, okay, we talk about Kubernetes and EKS Anywhere and starting to make it viable, but actually on the ground, it's still quite new.
Yeah, perhaps maybe we need a chart for this, maybe like a graph. One end where we're still kind of in the quagmire of the data center and all these sort of old legacy workloads and monolithic apps is kind of quite thick, and then it kind of thins out as we go more towards sort of public cloud and serverless and all the kind of all the latest stuff.
On the flip side, let's take a more positive sort of cloud view. And one of the questions I've sort of posed is most new development cloud-based? And I think the answer to that is very different than whereas my existing system's running, because they've been running for years and years and years and years, and how do I move them and all those. But when people are building new applications, I think the vast bulk of them now are being built with the cloud in mind. They're using the tools, they're using the environments, they're running them in a cloud environment. And this is where the hybrid cloud comes in, isn't it? You've got a new application, you put it into AWS, you do need to make that link back to data maybe that's part of a system of record. Absolutely. So there's a sort of sense that these two worlds, where there are new applications, and to be, they're being done in a cloud way. And to be fair to the likes of an IBM or a Unisys or whatever that have got real old legacy mainframes, they've done a lot of work to ensure that it's easy to make those links, to provide the tool sets that run in their environments. So I think you can take a much more positive view that says new applicant. But of course, you've broken the new applications up into such small component parts. Microservices, containerized, function as a service, all those sort of things. Says it's not like applications were in the old days. You can't make a direct comparison. But most new development is going in a cloud environment. I think would be a way of saying it. But there's still an awful lot of that old stuff sitting on in a different world that will be there for many years to come.
Yeah, so at least cloud aware, if not cloud native, so to speak.
Correct.
And I think we can probably go on the whole session for
I know.
talking about this one. So
we'll go round in a loop in a minute if we're not careful.
Yeah. Thank you very much for watching this talk. If you enjoyed the content, please comment, share, like, and subscribe to support the channel. See you next time.